So let's jump into something that I heard about recently. We saw this new headline come across. One of our lenders has the available 99% loan, 1% down payment.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of two minds. There's two strategies, right? Get a big long mortgage and don't put any cash down and just make your payments, right? And use your cash for other stuff. The other part of me says, well, you're only going to put 1% down. You have a 99% of your home balance mortgaged. I don't know if that's a great scenario. So where do you stand on the outlook between, hey, great chance for low down payment versus that might be over leveraged?
Well, I think the key is everybody's different in their situation of cash availability and relatives to get into a home. I think the number one key is, how do I get into a home? How do I qualify for it? And this is a product that allows you, the biggest hurdle for most people is down payment, saving the cash, because all the other costs we have to deal with day to day. So that opens that door without raising the interest rates up. The 1% down still puts you in the range of having competitive rates. You don't have to go zero down and take a higher interest rate. It gives you all the perks and benefits of that, as long as you fit into the income category.
Because normally if you're a first-time home buyer, the lowest down you could go would be 3 to 3.5%. And then the zero down would be like a state bond program with a higher interest rate, or a veteran loan, which is only for veterans, obviously.
Right, yeah. I mean, VA is second to none. That's an awesome deal, but only veterans qualify for that, or spouses of veterans.
Now, to do the 1% down payment, I think you have to have 80% of the adjusted area or adjusted median income, the AMI, right? So each zip code is going to have a median income for the area, and if you're at 80% of that income, you have access to certain other loan programs.
Yes.
And you may have to be a first-time buyer as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, but a lot of the programs where you do get a benefit, you not only have to meet an income restriction, you also have to have an ownership restriction of being a first-time buyer.
But if you go through Freddie Mac, you don't have to have the first-time home buyer restriction, which is great. And this product does go through that scenario, and it's set up with the largest lender in the country, so they have the best MI available too, which is, it's not the same everywhere. And that's the thing, is you got to check with your lender you're working with to make sure you look at all the details, the cost to get in, the interest rate, the actual payment, and find out, what the bottom line is. It doesn't just mean I get in cheaper and I'm making this huge payment. That's not the goal. The goal is to win in all categories.
Yeah, because as you're shopping for your home, you're also shopping for a mortgage. That's something my wife reminded me of. Most people think of, hey, shop around. Like, well, of course I'm going to shop around for the house I like. And I was trying to encourage someone to shop around for their mortgage. And my wife reminded me, hey, people don't always think about shopping for the mortgage. And when it comes to the mortgage, not only is your interest rate different between lenders in some cases, the closing costs can be different, and the mortgage insurance can be different if you have mortgage insurance on your loan. So those are three variables. Interest rate and closing costs are tied together. And then your mortgage insurance rate is another, variable that can be different among different lenders. And then on top of that, obviously you have the service piece, which mostly boils down to personality match. But yeah, the price is a big deal. And then of course, between different lenders, there's different loan programs. And so if you need a specific loan program, like 1% down, you have to go to a lender that offers that. Not everyone offers that. And then beyond that, right, go through all the pricing breakdown and personality matchups of who do you want to work with. Yeah. But that's what we're talking about, shopping the mortgage. There's a couple different things at play within that.
Well, and figured out up front, because our market, even though nationally they say there's inventories increasing and the sales price increases is settling down, which is good news for buyers. That's nationally. You got to look at the market you're in.
Right.
Things are still active and hot, and we don't see a lot of, let's make a deal out there. It's still a tight market, and so you got to be pre-approved. But that's where you sit down with your loan officer, and you get set up, and you compare it. I will gladly talk to anybody to compare. If they've got a quote, give us a shot, and I have a pretty confident we can improve on it for you, and it's worth that, because you only get to do this. When you close on a loan, you do it once. So you want to make sure you do the prep work in advance so you make the right decision, and you get the best value that's out there. And that's what our goal has been, to do exactly that. When we went to this version of the wholesale lending, is get the best package out there for the client, so they know they don't have to look over their shoulder to wonder if they got a good deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's a great time to shop as well. The market's, receptive out there, and agents are, anxious to help you.
Well, and the one thing I would say too, if you are getting prepared to purchase a home, that's when you get your pre-approval and shop around a couple different lenders to see where things stack up, and then figure out who you want to work with up front.
Yep.
I have seen this scenario sometimes where people are, oh, we found a house, we made an offer, our offer was accepted, let's lock and get it closed. And then you think you're going to buy a house and it's all chill and laid back. And then all of a sudden you get your offer accepted and you're like, oh, we're going to close in 30 days. This huge sense of urgency rises up and you might feel pressured, like I'm just going to take my loan from my credit union or whatever, and that it's good enough and not shop around. So that's the downside of not being prepared up front. You still get through your transaction, and probably be okay. And we have plenty of people call us and say, hey, I just got my offer accepted. What rate can we get? And that's fine. But one of my recent clients, they I felt that pressure with them, that they were asking me to double check the rate and all this stuff compared to another quote they had. But they were already under contract. There wasn't a lot of time. And there wasn't a huge sense of comfort to take your time, make your decision, and do your research. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of get pre-approved. That way, when you're talking to different lenders, there's no deadline. And you're not like, hey, I got to close in 30 days. Who can perform? You kind of figure that out up front. And then once you get your contract, you have time to make some of those last minute decisions, but at least you're prepared. And at least hey, these two people are really close. And maybe one is going to beat the other out when it comes time for brass tacks. But I love seeing it that way, where you're prepared and you're going into it clean, versus I'm kind of chasing my tail. So, and you can't always be prepared. I had a client who their landlord passed away and the estate was sold where they were renting from, and so they were in a place where they had to buy a house like within 45 days. It was crazy. And so, but they knew me. They'd been pre-approved, for almost over a year. But that's a scenario where they would have had no time really to shop and look around. There was kind of, oh, we're either going to rent another place or buy another place. We found a place, let's make, and sometimes that stuff happens pretty quick.
Yeah, well, 30 days for us seems like a long time because we're used to performing in a quick, that time period in this industry. To buy a home, move, make all those plans, all those adjustments, that's a lot of stuff to do in a short period of time. And especially if you're moving across town or across state or across the country, everything's different. So you want to be as comfortable and reassured as possible, during that process. And that's why it's never too early to get going. Some people take longer to find a home and, to find the right home. And if that's what it takes, it's what it takes. But get the work done so you're not, like Jeff said, not feeling scrambled at the last minute and pressured. It's hard enough to go pick out your homeowner's insurance.
Yeah.
For some people. It's a challenge because there's so much stuff out there and all the things that have changed lately and adjustments and those things as well.
I think it also changes the service that you're going to get, because if I know I have time to explain things and answer all of your questions and wait for you to have more questions and then answer those questions, I get a different sense of urgency and feeling from that versus, okay, this person's going to make the decision in 2 hours. I have 100 things to tell you, but I can only tell you 10 of them. So let's just whittle this down. I'd rather take the time and not feel like I'm rushing or shortchanging any kind of information. And so we do the best we can with the timeframes we have. But that's why I'm such a big proponent. There's a lot to talk about with mortgage insurance, home insurance, if you have a homeowners association, whether it's a condo, whether there's any deals with the inspection, how the inspection is different from the appraisal, what to expect with your disclosures. Are you going to close in person at the title company? Are you going to close remote? Are you going to close with a notary? We want to go through all these things and not feel like I'm jamming all this information down your throat.
I think we answer a lot more questions after they've purchased the home than before.
Right.
And after the application, because all that stuff comes to a head then where they go, oh, what about this? What about that? And that's normal.
But that's why we're a proponent of this podcast, of getting as much information out there as we can. Watch it, have questions, ask us questions, and at least this is a way of me feeling like I can do my part of trickling some of this stuff out there. Because the last thing I want to be is a pushy salesperson. And if hey, you got to schedule a 2-hour phone call to talk to me because I have so much to tell. Like, well, no, I'll tell you as much as you want to know, but setting aside enough time to go through that. It's not just a 5-minute application and boom, you're approved.
Yeah.
And there's people that will do that, and maybe I've done that before in my career, but I'm more in the stage now where let's make sure we're all prepared and go through it smooth and clean.
Well, and I get near the end of it too, and I don't care if it's your first home or your fifth home, with the changes with TRID and everything, like when it gets down to the wire and here's your closing date coming up, then you have to sign a closing disclosure. And everybody goes, well, how soon do I have to do that? Well, it starts the clock ticking when we get your docs out. So everything falls in line with other things, so it fits in your timeline. So all that stuff's important, but it's sometimes it's a little too much to take in all at the beginning. But that's why you need a kind of a coach, advisor, what we do in the process, so you get from A to Z and you feel good about it when you get to that closing table and sign those papers.
Yep. And yeah, and then hopefully within this market, you work with someone you could work with again, because there's a good chance you would refi whatever mortgage you get into the next 6 months. You might refinance any of those loans within the next couple of years if the market has any changes and rates start to come down, and see what happens with inflation and all those other metrics. But
there's so much going on in our country today, let alone the world, that affects things on a daily basis. And so you definitely got to be in tune, because you don't, like Freddie Mac reports the rates a week later. They report rates every Thursday, but it's the rates from last week. And so it's not always, current. So you definitely got to be, and you can't just go look on the web, go, hey, what's the best rate?
Well, I think you can watch the news and read it to kind of maybe get a gauge of what direction things are going, versus getting an accurate pinpoint of where things exactly are. To get the pinpoint, you have to call a service provider. Hey, what's my insurance going to cost me today? Give me a quote now. Hey, what's my interest rate going to be today? Give me a quote. Because these things change, and what is today might not be so tomorrow.
Absolutely. I mean, today, hourly. I mean, things, it's improving, we can get the benefit. If it's changing, getting worse throughout the day, which it happens when some major economic announcement comes out, unemployment figures or inflation numbers, or there's unrest in certain cities in the country, going on. So everything affects it. Nothing's isolated anymore. So definitely important. That's why you got to have somebody in your corner that's watching all those details, and just to keep you in tune, and not to, give you all the details how it's moving every second, but stay in touch with them so you can take advantage when you're ready to pull the trigger on a rate.
And so one of the things that we're doing in addition to this podcast, we're also developing a series of videos. So my 100 things I would tell someone if they're going to buy a house that I want to tell them up front, we're going to condense those down, and mine might be a little different than yours, but we're each going to do a little series of about 4 to 5 videos saying, hey, here's our onboarding package. So if you want to know everything there is to know about the loan process, watch these 4 or 5 videos.
The basics.
Get you up to speed if you want to know all that information, and then that way you can kind of watch it at your own pace and then have questions for us back, versus getting on a big lecture and watching me do a 2-hour Zoom presentation to tell you everything. So if you want the information, it's there, and then we can follow up to schedule it. But that's just something that we want to do as a test to see, is that helpful for people, and does that help you understand the process? Because you don't know what you don't know, and if you're doing something you've never done before, kind of hard to know what questions to ask. So here's a starting point, and whatever topics interest you, read through those, watch through them, and then so that's something to watch for. And also getting a newsletter out where we're going to recap some of these things and kind of just highlight some high-level need-to-know industry news, like if there's a 1% loan coming out, if there's any major market movements, and it's worth doing a refinance. And so that's something to watch for. If you guys want to stay in touch with us, you can sign up to receive our newsletter. So.
Well, and I think in the past, I've always been one to give out knowledge. That's been my key. Learn this industry, share that information. So I've been, doing this over 38 years. So I've accumulated a lot of data. Hopefully some of it stayed in there. Anyhow, so that information is there, and it's really helpful. And in the past, I've probably given away too much information, and people have gotten loans elsewhere because I didn't have competitive rates. Well, now I've got the captive situation, so we can do the best situation. We can find out the best situation for you in the market, so we will not lose a transaction. We'll make sure you get a good package, that type of thing. So definitely compare with us. And any questions we will answer the best we can. And if we don't have the answer, we'll get to the lender or we'll get to the title company or whoever, appraiser, whatever kind of information you need to get those things answered for you. So that's our goal.
Yep. Empower the homeowner.
Absolutely. You really do have the power when you're buying a house. You may not feel like it, but you really do. And you want to feel good about it and you want to enjoy it. And it's a fun process. And we want to make it that way. It can be stressful, but yes, we want to take the bulk of that stress out and make the enjoyment factor of becoming a homeowner or a repeat homeowner back in the scenario so you can enjoy the move.
All right.
All right. Well, have a great weekend and happy Flag Day tomorrow. And hope all is well.
All right. See you on the next one.